Hi, in this video, I'm going to show you tools that Westlaw has for practitioners. But before we get started, if you do not have the handout that accompanies this video, please pause the video and go to the same place where you obtained the link for the video, and you'll find there the handout for this for my presentation, and you can follow along. All right, so Westlaw practice materials. First, I'm going to show you something that's called Litigation Analytics, and you can't miss it because it's all over this home page. It's up here at the top, in these top boxes. It's in the far left. It's also right in the middle of your screen, Litigation Analytics, and it's at the bottom of your screen if you keep scrolling down under Specialty Areas, Litigation Analytics. This is a very helpful tool, and I'm going to show you what it is. So let's go into it. I'm opening Litigation Analytics up. And this is a great tool to research specific judges that you are going to be before, as well as attorneys. And you see they also have law firms that you can search too. But the three that I think that are going to be the most useful are judges, attorneys, and case types. And I'm going to show you what information you get from each of these. So you just click whichever one you want to search. I'm going to first show you judges, and you see judges is already clicked, and I'm going to search for Judge Steele. Judge Steele is a judge right here in Fort Myers in the United States District Court. So why was this helpful? Let's say you have never been before Judge Steele, and but now you will be appearing before him. You always should do some research before you go into court. Always research your opponent as well as your judge. So on the right-hand side, you get some basic information about the judge, including his career timeline, which might be helpful. In the middle box here, though, this is where the information really becomes interesting, because you see here, I can get some information such as what is his grant rate? How often does he grant motions? So if I'm a defendant and I'm thinking about filing a motion for summary judgment, even before I do that, I can see here he only grants these 36% of the time. So my likelihood of success is not very good. So 36% of the time out of 486 of these types of motions that he has considered. And you see the other types of motions that they have here listed as well. So before I go ahead and file a type of motion, I should check this out to even see if it is worth my while. And you also see there's plaintiff motions noted here as well. I can click this to see all motions. I can actually look at the motions. I also might be interested in how long it takes him to rule on motions. And so you see a motion for summary judgment, it takes him 96 days to do that, generally. Also, what types of cases does he handle most frequently? His 5 top cases you see are listed here. And also, it's very helpful to know how often is the judge overturned on appeal. And you see here, he's only overturned, he's not overturned very often at all. The vast majority of times he is affirmed. And then also you get some recent activity, his recent cases. You can also search by case type. So let's say I have a case before him where I'm trying to assert an arbitration clause. Well, let's look at arbitration. I just clicked it. Right. So now all this information now is just limited to his arbitration cases. So you can see how this could be very helpful if you're unfamiliar with a particular judge, especially if you've not appeared before that judge before. Okay, so that's how to get information on a judge. I can also get, just by clicking on this box, I can also get information about a particular case. So I just click case type, and let's say I'm interested in asbestos types of cases. All right, it tells me that I'm going to be under torts and negligence, products liability, asbestos. So I open this up. You'll see I'm going to get a map here of the United States. Right now, it's showing me state jurisdiction for asbestos cases, and it's giving me the top dockets where these cases are pending. You see, so there's over 5,000 asbestos cases pending in New York. And then you scroll down and you see the law firms, the top law firms that are involved in these types of cases, as well as the top parties. Also very helpful, types of motions. Again, this motion for summary judgment, this is granted 47% of the time. So this can be very helpful if you are dealing in a type of lawsuit that you're not that familiar with. You can even come over here to outcomes, and you can see what are the types of outcomes for these types of cases, and get the results here. So you see we've got quite a bit of cases have uncontested dismissal. Some cases are getting settled. Some are resolved. Very few are resolved on dispositive motion. And you can click over here for the specific details if you want. So you see, very few cases are going to verdict. So if you are a defendant, that's very helpful information to know. And then from here, you could limit by jurisdiction and even by judge if you are interested, or law firm, to get specifics as to those types of information. Okay. So that's case type. You can also get information about attorneys. So as I said at the outset, you need to know your judge that you're pending before, but also who your opponent is. So you just search by last name. And I am interested in this person here. Allard is his last name. Mark is his first name. Basic information on the right-hand box, just like for the judges. But real close, you can see when he is in federal court, 61% of the time he represents the defendant, 35% of the time the plaintiff. You can switch this over to when he's in state court, and you see now how the representation alters slightly. It also gives you the main types of cases and where he is appearing. So most frequently in state court, you see he appears in the Court of Appeals more often than the Supreme Court for Michigan. But if we switch to federal court, now you see he does a lot of work in federal court, and you can see the types of cases that he handles. So if you're against him on a labor and employment case, you can see he's very experienced in this type of case. You can also see the top 5 courts, federal courts in this case, where he practices. You can see how successful he is on his motions that he files. He's 64% success rate on his filed motions for summary judgment. And then you can even see the motions. You can recent activity here at the bottom. You can limit your search by filing date if you're looking for a particular date, or even jurisdiction. So if you're only interested in Court of Appeals cases, you can find that out by limiting that. You can also limit it just by cases. So labor and employment came up as the top. You can see his success rate on labor and employment cases for motions for summary judgment that's 71%. That's incredible. So know your opponent. Here's the key: know your opponent, know your judge. And so that's what litigation analytics is used for. Now I'm going to take you back to the main screen or the home screen. Now let's get into some state-specific material. So it's always helpful to know your jurisdiction, and if you're dealing with a state jurisdiction, go into state materials, and I'm going to show you this information or these tools using the Florida database. So I'm going to click Florida. You'll find, if you go out to practice in another state though, you'll find some very similar types of tools in those states. All right, so we always talk about going to secondary sources first, and that's what we're going to do. You'll see some very common secondary sources here, and also some that are very helpful for practitioners, such as the Florida Practice Series, Trawick's Florida Practice and Procedure, Florida Pleading and Practice Forms, Trawick's Florida Practice and Procedure Forms. All right, so some very helpful information can be found in those litigation-specific materials. But there are also others. To get to the others, or to get to all of them, click All Florida Secondary Sources. I'm going to show you how to quickly navigate to sources that would be helpful for litigation, such as you have for this course. So we're already in Florida, so we don't have to limit our jurisdiction to Florida. But now I'm going to limit by topic. And so now you see all these various topics. Since this course is a litigation-based course, I want to look at the litigation secondary sources. So these are sources, secondary sources dedicated to litigation. And there's 20 of them, it tells me right here. If you're going to do, or if you're in the Court of Appeals, right here, Appellate Practice, a great book to look at. I'm going to show you, though, some other things that would be helpful. Civil practice in the Florida Practice Series, very helpful. Florida Civil Procedure Forms, also in the Florida Practice Series. And the Florida Elements of Civil Action, similar to the Florida Causes of Action. Florida Pleading and Practice Forms, Florida Standard Jury Instructions, Civil. All right, so some very good resources for you. I'll open up the civil practice just so you can see what we have here. So we're not in trials yet, so we're just going to be in part 1. So I could just look through the table of contents here. I could also go into the civil practice index, or I could do a search. But for me, usually, I just like to stay with, when I'm looking at secondary sources, especially a book like this, I like to stick either with the table of contents or the index. So for example, you have a pleading assignment coming up, and this gives you the rules for pleadings, how to claim relief, and also defensive pleadings. For example, right there, answer, affirmative defenses. Also, there's a chapter on discovery. That's another assignment you have coming up. So that's the civil practice. There's also the civil procedure forms. That's the next one here. I'll open this one up for you. click the plus sign, you can open up then the table of contents. So if you're filing for the first time a pleading in Florida State Court, here, for example, you don't know what a common caption should look like. Well, this will tell you. Also, what would a general form look like? This will tell you. There's also just generally motions. Now this, though, just so you know, this is for Florida State Court. This is not for Florida Federal Court. What would interrogatories look like, or production of documents look like? So you have some of these assignments coming up. So you can look to see what these documents would look like to get an idea. And then I'm going to show you the Florida elements of civil action, which you can search by a search query. You can also just look through the table of contents. Okay, if you're doing dog bite liability, look here. There's a whole chapter on it. Gives you the elements, gives you the defenses. Very helpful to know both. Even if you are a plaintiff, it's always helpful to know what the other side is going to argue. Research assistance, this is very helpful. I'm going to show you this. All right, this tells you other places to look. For example, you learned first year about the West key number system. It tells you what key numbers are helpful for this type of a case. So you don't have to search to figure out a key number. It actually tells you. It gives you another secondary source to look at. This Florida personal injury and wrongful death action secondary source. Okay, so don't skip over the research assistance. It also has some information about jury verdicts involving dog bites. So you can get an idea of how much these cases are worth. Very helpful when you're trying to help your client out. And strategize, how much are you going to pursue this case? And also sample jury instructions, and at the bottom, I got ahead of myself. Sample jury instructions, also very helpful because this is the law that you're going to have to establish, and a sample complaint. All right. So that's the elements of action, elements of civil action. So very helpful. Now I'm going to go back to Florida secondary sources, back to our limit on, or our filter on litigation. Just some others to point out, which I did earlier, but I still will again. Florida pleading in practice forms, the standard jury instructions, and there's another Trey-Wicks pleading in practice forms. Okay, so these are tools, resources that attorneys use in practice. All right, now I'm going to remove litigation from here. All right, another way to find secondary sources is by searching according to the substantive law. So now I'm at the I'm at the top of page 2 of the handout. And so let's say we're still dealing with our dog bite scenario. So we're going to look for dog bite. Where would we find dog bite? If I go into topic, not going to find a topic for dog bite, but what area of law does dog bite fall under? Well, it is a tort. So let me look at torts and personal injury. So I click that box. And you see now I can, the the resources that cover that: Florida jurisprudence, personal injury, wrongful death, and pleading in practice. Maybe personal injury and wrongful death sounds interesting. So I can go into there, and then I can look at the table of contents to see if there's one that's specifically related to dog bite, or maybe now is the time that I type in dog bite. And so now it's just doing a search in this particular resource. All right. Liability under the dog bite statute, defenses to strict liability, development of the dog bite statute. All right. So a lot of helpful information just relating to that particular topic. Okay. And now we're going to back up, and I'm going to go back to the Florida database. And I'm going to show you forms. So right under secondary sources is forms, Florida Form Finder. So once again, I can focus by topic. We're going to look at litigation civil trial. But if you're doing appeals, you see you've got litigation civil appeals, also litigation federal appeals. But I'm going to open litigation civil trial. And under the documents that I'm searching for, I'm going to put in complaint here. So all documents have to deal with complaint. And I want this exact phrase, dog bite. And then we are going to search it. All right, so this is now finding forms for me relating to dog bites. And if I scroll a little bit, looks like right here, complaint relating to dog bites, but this is American jurisprudence. So this is very general resource. So I want to make sure that we're only getting Florida back. So I just click jurisdiction Florida. All right, now I'm just dealing with cases, forms just relating to Florida. So here's a complaint by a pedestrian attacked by a dog. Here's a complaint by a homeowner against a neighbor attacked by a dog. In that same resource that I showed you earlier, the Florida pleading and practice form. So this is just another way to get to that same form under forms. Okay. So multiple ways again to find forms. I do want to show you a little trick here. So under this tab, under filter, under this button, if you slide this button over, anytime you click in here in these filters, it'll automatically run the search for you instead of requiring you to hit the apply button. Just a little trick. All right, I'm going back to Florida. Under forms, there are briefs, Florida briefs. So these are briefs filed by attorneys in Florida courts, state courts. So these would be helpful to see how attorneys are handling particular types of cases. And you can actually pull up their briefs and read them. A caveat though, so be careful. You don't know the attorneys that are writing these briefs. There's some very good attorneys out there, but there's also some poor attorneys out there. So when you're reading briefs, you got to check everything. So just because they cite a case, that doesn't mean that case is actually good law or is even applicable for that situation. So if you look at briefs, please be careful and only treat them like you would another secondary source. So that means you can't copy and paste from briefs. That would be plagiarism. Instead, you can look at it. You can see how the argumentation is organized. You can see the particular arguments being made. You can see the cases that are relied upon, but always go check. You might find that some of those cases you would want to use, but some of them maybe you don't want to use, but you just don't take the attorney's word for it. The next thing I want to show you, if we keep scrolling down in the state database, jury verdicts and settlements. Also very helpful for you in trying to strategize your case. How much is my case worth? Client always thinks their case is worth a ton of money, but that in reality is probably not true. So this would give you some ammunition to help talk to your client about the realistic possibility for his or her case. So we're going to stick with dog bite. So I want cases dealing with dog within 5 of bite. 379 come up, probably a lot to look at. I could limit by date though, under here the date range, so I could limit by a specific date range or within the last 3 years, for example. You see that would limit me by 13. Another way to limit is search within results. So let's say my case is a case dealing with injury to hand, a bite to the hand. So I'm going to put hand in the search within results. That brings me down to 51 cases. So here we have a dog bite to the right hand. This one was dog bite to the leg and hand. This one appears to be just to the hand. So I'll show you what this looks like when we open it up. It tells you where the case, gives you the case name, the parties, the docket number, when it was settled, the date it was settled, and a summary. So here we have a verdict of $22,100 for the plaintiff. No expert witnesses, tells you the judge. All right, so some very helpful information here. And you can even limit this to a particular county. So you could pull back all of the cases in that county relating to dog bites. So that would give you a good indication about, how much are these types of case worth in this particular county. So that's searching jury verdicts and settlements. So that takes us now to the middle of page 2. I'm going to go back to Westlaw Edge and show you how to get into federal specific material. So from content type, I'm going to go into secondary sources. From here, you could jump into texts and treatises by type, or you can scroll down to by topic, and you could get into specific secondary sources by topic. So if you're doing criminal law, you probably want to come down here and open up criminal law. We're dealing with litigation in federal court, so I'm going to open up the litigation tab or button. And in litigation now, we are in the litigation type of document or secondary sources. And I want to limit this though to just federal. So I'm going to click federal. So these are secondary sources just dedicated to litigation in the federal system. Now I could have reached the same place just by going through I'm going to back up to show you by going to text and treatises, then limit by litigation and federal. So I come down here and I'm going to, for jurisdiction, click federal. I only want federal cases. I don't want federal sources. I don't want state, and I don't want state and federal. That would be national. And by topic, so litigation, and we should be to the same place that we were. All right, so now you can just scan through the types of the types of treatises available to you. You can scan through these titles. You could do a search here if you're doing something very specific. But I want to point out a couple to you that I think are very helpful and that practitioners use a lot. So I clicked on F because that gives me to the book starting with F. And I'm going to point out to you the federal, I'm scrolling down, Federal Practice and Procedure by Wright and Miller. Now, Wright and Miller is a resource that litigation attorneys in federal court use all the time. When I practiced in federal court, this was my go-to source. This also is a highly respected source by courts and is often cited by judges. So that's why I point this out to you. It breaks down the federal rules of civil procedure very nicely for you, and will also give you case law. So it gives you commentary and case law on federal procedure. So if you are wondering what a particular rule is about, come here. You see, it breaks down all the federal rules of civil procedure. It even has a large section on jurisdiction. Okay, diversity jurisdiction, you're stuck on that, come here. Or you need to do a removal, come here. All right. Explains venue. Great information for you. You can also do a key term search as well, instead of just looking through the various chapters. Or the index. All right. So I showed you forms for Florida. You can also find forms for federal material. So I'm going back to the main screen, and there is forms right here under content type. I could search by state. So I already showed you Florida. I did that when I was in the Florida database. If you didn't do that, you could just go into the form finder, then into the state. But we are not in state. We are in federal. So we are going to search by publication. I could also search by type, for example, litigation, and then limit or filter my search to federal. Or I want to show you a few here by publication. The West Federal Forms and the Federal Procedure Forms. These are the two I'm going to show you. So the West Federal Forms, we are in district court. We see district court civil. There's also district court criminal if you end up doing that. I'm just going to open this up. You have a complaint coming up. Well, Chapter 7 is dedicated to complaints. So the rules dedicated to the pleading of a complaint, and you see some general forms. You also have an answer assignment coming up. There's a chapter on answers. There's also discovery. You have some discovery coming up. Depositions and interrogatories. Request for production of documents. So here's discovery by production of documents. Here's also chapter 24, interrogatories to parties. Okay, so West Federal forms. Now, obviously you cannot just take a form and use the whole form. Everything has to be modified for your particular fact pattern and your particular situation. There's also federal procedure forms. Same idea though. Actions in district court. Right, this first one here deals with pleadings. Just keep opening up. You see a guide on pleadings. So what should a caption look like in federal court? A complaint, answer, affirmative defenses. All right. There's also motion for judgment. Other types of motions in this chapter. Let's see if there's a motion. I keep clicking motion for, I don't see a motion for summary judgment. There probably is. It may not be in this particular section. And then you get the forms here. So you get the discussion on it and then the forms. Okay, so that is a couple ways to get forms. Now, another tool is the Westlaw Form Builder. So you see this on the right-hand side. So anytime I was in the forms finder, you see Westlaw Form Builder pops up. So even if I go back to the home screen and I click Forms, the Westlaw Form Builder is under Tools and Resources. So I'll show you what this is helpful for. So this takes you into a different platform outside of Westlaw. So I can either search by jurisdiction or by topic. If I go by topic, I'm still going to limit by jurisdiction. So let's look to see what sort of litigation documents, so I'm clicking litigation, appear for Florida. So you see, not every state, by the way, has litigation forms. So I'm going to open up Florida. And these are the types of forms available for Florida. Here's some great ones, by the way. Fee agreements, intake sheets. All right, so basic forms to help you set up your representation of a client. Service of process forms. You've never filed for an injunction. Here's a form for injunction. Here's a form for dispositive motions. Here's a form for interrogatories, which breaks down the different types of interrogatories based on the type of case you have. Okay, also depositions. So if you practice in Florida, I would encourage you to come and look in this database to get forms to help you get started. Now let's look what they have for federal. You see, for federal, not going to be very helpful unless you're doing criminal defense or you're in California. But you still may find some helpful stuff for your case this semester in Florida under litigation. It at least will give you an idea of what, for example, for discovery, what types of interrogatory questions to ask for a particular type of case. And if you've never seen interrogatories before, this at least will give you an idea of what interrogatories look like. Same thing for production of documents and things. So a lot of the stuff that I'm showing you may not be specifically applicable to your assignments in this class, but I hope that you would remember these resources when you are out in practice. All right, I'm going to go back to, I'm going to close the form builder. And now I'm resuming my session in Westlaw. I'm going to show you another platform that's available from Westlaw, but it is not Westlaw. So now I'm at the top of page 4. You come over here to the top and you see this little drop down arrow, click it. You see practical law here, and another way to get into Westlaw Form Builder, by the way, or to take you to law school, Westlaw. I'm going to show you practical law. This is kind of nifty. All right, now to access the information in practical law, there's 2 ways to get about it. You can search by practice area, so for example, litigation, or you can search by jurisdiction. So I could go into, for example, Florida, or if I'm doing federal, I could go into federal. Under the, so at the middle of page 4 here, I'm going to go into litigation. And from here, we're going to need to narrow things down. But you can see that I can search for commencement of a case with pleadings. I could search for discovery and evidence. I could search for motions. So we're just starting our case out. So I'm going to look at commencement and pleadings. And then we're going to narrow by jurisdiction. So I could look at pleadings for national and federal. I'll show you though for Florida. So you have this when you get out into practice. Look at this, commencing lawsuit, drafting the complaint. So these are practice notes on what you need when you're drafting the complaint, what you need when you're filing the complaint. Also going to show you something over here. If you click on resource type, click on toolkits and checklists. So it's pulling up checklists right now, and I'm going to do it again. I want to find toolkits. Checklists are exactly what they are, or what they sound like. They provide a checklist that you can look at, almost like a rubric that you can look at to make sure that you have everything that you need. The toolkits are very interesting. I think these are pretty cool. So I'm going to open up the toolkit, because the toolkit pulls all the information in practical law for you into one spot. So it's like Walmart. So notice what this toolkit, it tells you what the toolkit includes. It includes those practical notes or practice notes that we were seeing on the first result panel. It also includes some documents. So here's a caption for you, and signature block, sample complaint, and also the checklist. So it pulls all this information to you in one place with hyperlinks to send you out to those specific documents. So I think it's very useful to look at these checklists and toolkits. So I'm going to return to my list so you can see what is available under discovery and evidence. You have discovery. Can I do it from here? Doesn't look like I can do it from here. So I got to go back another, let me go back to the main screen under litigation, open up now discovery and evidence. If we limit again to checklists, and I'm going to, actually I want to select multiple, so I'm going to open this up, and jurisdiction, we want to see what Florida has for us. All right, now I'm going to hit apply. So I opened that up because I wanted multiple things done. There's only 9 here. So look at this. A checklist for arranging the deposition. What do you need in a notice of deposition? What do you need if you need to subpoena somebody? Here's a checklist. So some really good information for you. All right. Now if I take Florida off, let's see what they have for under the national or federal jurisdiction, since that's a jurisdiction that you are concerned about. And then you could even do a search if you want. So let's search. Let's see what they have for interrogatories. Here we go, interrogatories and document requests. Well, look at this. Document requests and subpoenas in federal court. Here's a toolkit. Document requests, requests for production of documents, federal. We don't want New Jersey, so we would skip that one. So there are some helpful information specifically related to practice in federal court. And the other one I wanted to show you relates to motions. So I'm going back to practical law. So I went over commencement and pleading, went over discovery, and now I'm clicking on motions. And you could limit this to Florida, or let's look to see what we have in our national or federal jurisdiction. And let's see if they have a helpful toolkit here. So I'm clicking toolkits. Attorney fees, discovery motions in federal court, dispositive motions in federal court. Well, you have a dispositive motion as an assignment towards the end of the semester, and here you go. Here is a toolkit for that. So it gives you some specific practice notes on specific areas of a dispositive motion. Right there, motions for summary judgment. And here is additional information on motion for summary judgment practice notes, more practice notes, some standard documents, and a checklist. So let me see what the checklist looks like. Determine when to make the motion, things to consider before drafting a motion, when to draft the motion, what your memorandum of law should include. And then it breaks it down for you. So that is practical law. Has some interesting resources, helpful resources dedicated to the practitioner. So I hope that you found this video helpful. You have the handout to use as well. And I hope that this will not only be useful for you in doing the assignments for this class, but that you'll also remember these when you actually get out into the practice of law. Thanks for your attention.